I received review copies of Sprawlopolis and Tussie Mussie from the publisher, so thanks to Button Shy. An 18-card cooperative city-building game which plays brilliantly solo, and an 18-card set collection game about flowers from Wingspan designer Elizabeth Hargrave. Two of the most popular titles in the extensive range of wallet-sized games from Button Shy. And that's the hook. I'm Adam Porter. I design games and I review them on this channel with a focus on product design. If you like what I do, please subscribe, comment and share the video. Sprawlopolis is a 2018 release from designers Stephen Aramini, Danny Devine and Paul Kluka. Several years ago I was impressed by a small set collection card game called Yardmaster, later re-released by Yellow as Aramini Circus, referencing its designer, Stephen Aramini, one of the trio who created Sprawlopolis. A tiny piece of trivia, but I always find it satisfying when I can make a connection to an earlier game I enjoyed. Danny Devine is not a new name to me either. Devine's Harvest Dice was a fun little roll and write from Grey Fox back in 2017. Sprawlopolis can be played by 1 to 4 players in around 15 minutes, but it works particularly well as a solitaire puzzle. The back of each card has a scoring condition on it, and 3 of these are selected to generate the puzzle for the game. The target score is determined by adding the 3 numbers. Each player starts the game with a single card, but the start player has 2 additional cards. On your turn, you play a card, and then you pass the remaining 2 cards to your neighbour, so they now have a hand of 3 to select from. In a solo game, you simply play one, then draw one. A card must be placed adjacent to existing cards or slightly overlapping, and they'll create blocks of matching terrain as well as connected networks of roads. And when all 15 cards have been played, the game ends. Players score 1 point per block in the largest group of each zone type, and they lose 1 point per connected road in the city. Finally, players score points for various criteria as determined by the selected cards at the start of the game. For example, you might be required to place park blocks inside the city but never on the edge, or score points for industrial blocks adjacent only to commercial and other industrial blocks. Or perhaps you need roads between parks. If you beat the target score, you win. Tussie Mussie is a 2019 release from Elizabeth Hargrave. Released in the same year as her mega hit engine builder Wingspan, Tussie Mussie is a much more unassuming little game. It can be played by 2 to 4 players in around 20 minutes. Now, a Tussie Mussie is apparently a Victorian bouquet of flowers with meanings assigned to the flowers within. On your turn, you draw 2 cards from the deck of 18, you offer them both to your neighbour, one face up so they can see what's on offer, and one face down so they don't know what they're getting. The recipient chooses which offer to accept, and the offerer collects the other card. Either way, the card is added to the right of each player's individual arrangement of flower cards, and they cannot be rearranged or flipped face up or face down. Any face up cards are called the player's bouquet, and face down cards are called keepsakes. When the game ends, each player will have 4 cards in their arrangement, and the cards will score in various ways. For example, the red tulip scores for each red card, the gardenia scores for each keepsake, the forget-me-not scores for each heart on the cards adjacent, and the daisy scores for each card without a heart. Scores are combined and another round is played, and the player with the highest combined total after 3 complete rounds wins the game. Now, I've already shared my musings on Button Shy's business model in my recent review of the outstanding Skulls of Sedlec. You can click on the link to hear my thoughts. But in brief, I think Button Shy, the publisher, is the real product here, rather than any one individual game. With regular new entries, all featuring 18 cards, packaged in a recognisable Button Shy wallet and featuring minimalist rule sets at affordable prices, this is really a magazine model, with committed fans likely to collect every new release from the company. It just so happens that Sprawlopolis and Tussie Mussie are 2 of the titles which have garnered the most attention. As with Skulls of Sedlec, I found both Sprawlopolis and Tussie Mussie extremely easy to learn from the tiny rule sheet, so onboarding was no problem. Should I wish to explore these titles in greater depth, there are a wealth of options for me. Tussie Mussie has 4 or 5 tiny expansion packs, each of which introduces more cards which score in a variety of ways. And Sprawlopolis has at least 6 expansion packs plus several standalone games in the same system. Agropolis, which focus on building farms. Naturopolis, which is all about landscapes. And Ultimopolis, which combines the 3. I haven't ventured beyond the Tussie Mussie or Sprawlopolis base games, but it's good to know the option is there. I rate games using my own ladder engagement system. A game is scored between 0 and 3 points in each of 5 categories, and each point scored climbs a game 1 rung up the engagement ladder. A score of 10 or above tops the ladder and indicates a real favourite with me. Tussie Mussie has very little thematic integration. The theme is well chosen, allowing for attractive decoration by prolific board game illustrator Beth Sobel, but it has little relevance to the gameplay. Sprawlopolis makes a little more sense, with scoring objectives telling a little story about the wishes of the town planners designing this sprawling cityscape. It's not deeply immersive, but the theme does come through. For interaction, Tussie Mussie scores well. It's a game where every move is designed to both further your own position and to punish your opponents. Offering face-down cards gives a nice opportunity for bluffing. Do they want me to take that face-down card? Is it a trap? Or are they hoping that I think that so they can keep it for themselves? Sprawlopolis is not really interactive. It's basically a solo puzzle you can play together. It's certainly possible to work it all out together in a small group, but there's very little secret information and communication is not limited, so there's nothing to stop an alpha player bulldozing the cooperative experience. For stress and challenge, Sprawlopolis scores well. It is a challenging puzzle, and each card draw can either take you closer to your goal or push you further away from it. The rules offer variants to level up the difficulty. A Tussie Mussie, though, is not really very stressful or challenging. There's a nice moment of reveal when you check out the face-down card you've been gifted, but this is essentially a pretty breezy game to play. Feedback describes the way in which a game responds to the player's inputs, and neither game scores highly here. With only 18 cards to play with, there's little scope for gaining in-game rewards. An entire round of Tussie Mussie results in gathering just 4 cards, and all scoring for Sprawlopolis is done at game end. And finally, for meaningful choices, Sprawlopolis scores a little higher. The main decisions in the game are focused on those scoring criteria, and which one to prioritise based on the cards you have in hand and the specific combination in play. Tussie Mussie is very light. You can set up neat combos if you gather the right cards, but much of the card selection is out of your hands and dependent on bluffing your opponents effectively. The overall scores are 5 for Tussie Mussie and 8 for Sprawlopolis. And really, that does reflect how I felt about the games. After a few rounds of Tussie Mussie, I didn't really feel like there was anything left to explore, whereas Sprawlopolis is an addictive little activity, especially when played solo, and I can see myself coming back to it fairly frequently. As I've stated previously, Button Shy is really the product here, rather than either of these titles as a standalone. But it might be interesting to imagine an alternate universe where each game was released as a unique product with a traditional route to market. Would they succeed? Or would they be instantly forgotten? Well, I like the core mechanism at play in Tussie Mussie. It's a very clever drafting system, but the game never really rises above that. If it wants to compete with the likes of Sushi Go or Point Salad, it feels like it needs more. I don't feel satisfied gathering 4 cards in a round. I think this would need to be at least doubled, and playing 3 identical rounds and totaling your scores feels like a cheap fix to balance the randomness. Of course, with the expansions, the game becomes much more substantial, and this may well answer my criticisms. Sprawlopolis, on the other hand, feels much bigger than the component list would suggest, partly because the cityscape takes up quite a bit of table space when laid out, but also because each card you play is deliberated over and takes a bit of time. By the time you've played 15 cards, you've invested a fair amount of thought into the process. The game could, of course, do with more content, but that's not really a problem. The multitude of expansions and sequels have you covered. It reminded me most of 2016's city builder Honshu, but without that game's clunky trick-taking drafting system. I think Sprawlopolis is a great little package, and of course the portability is a huge plus. If you'd like to hear about my favourite filler games, follow the link, and I'll see you next time. Until then, all the best.